Fantastic. So for those of you that don't know, the website's been running for about 4 years, and we do events. We're going to be doing lots more virtual events. I myself run a group in North London. We've got a few people here today from the group, so hey to you. Gilly runs a group in Warrington, so she'll be giving you details of that. And there's lots more things coming up. So, you know, we welcome you guys getting involved and helping us to shape the service. So please add any comments that you want to, and you can also email us and DM. So I'll just share those details with you now before I hand over to Lara. So if anyone does want to live tweet or anything as we go, then please use the hashtag #HowToBeAdopted or tag us at @HowToBeAdopted. Today's format, we'll briefly introduce the team before we hand over to Lara. And then, as I said, we've got a Q&A. So we've got a really decent amount of time for Q&A. So please feel free, just ask us anything. Gilly will give us an overview of some important research she's been doing. And then we'll close on time at 2:30. So just the email is here. So if you do have any questions or thoughts, that's your email to use. Okay, so I will hand over to Gilly now to do an introduction about her work up in the north. So Gilly, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. It's actually sunny in the north, can you believe? The sun's come out, yoo-hoo! Yeah, my name's Gilly Bruce, adoptee, and been working as a trainer and a coach, and I'm currently training to be a psychotherapist, and I'll be qualified by the summer, yoo-hoo! So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, I was adopted at 8 weeks old. I ignored it all until I was 46, never spoke about adoption. It's fine, absolutely nothing, no problem. And then at 46, I decided I needed to find my birth family. So I went and did that, thinking that might make me feel a bit better. And guess what? It didn't. So by the time I was 53, I decided I needed to actually deal with this stuff. So, you know, a good long life of ignoring the thing until you realise, nah, this needs some work on it. And yeah, here we are now in quite a different place altogether, actually, which is great. So I guess I joined How to Be Adopted, I think it was 2019, Claire. Anyway, it was, you know, a good while. So we've been writing blogs and we've been kind of identifying our areas of interest. And my particular bag is in changing the legislation around who can work with adoptees, because at the minute it's very restrictive. You know, you have to have specialised adoptee counsellor training to work with adoptees, and there's few and far between. You know, there's many areas with no provision whatsoever. So we're currently trying to sort of work with Ofsted and the Department of Education and try and create some change around who gets to counsel adult adoptees, not to change the provision for younger people, but to change the provision for who can do this work, because it's a bit of a nonsense at the moment, and there's not enough. So that's a bag. And also I'm interested in helping others sort of feel better with it. Heal's the wrong word, but you know, that kind of seems to fit. That I'm really interested in helping us all find life a bit easier with this. And you know, I've had my own journey, my own things that have worked, tried things that haven't worked, and you know, just basically trying to improve things. But you know, we're all kind of defining individual goals and what we want to do, and for the adoptee community. So it's interesting, and there's a lot going on. It feels as if there's a lot of momentum going on right now, which is just great. Seems to be great change afoot. So yeah, happily. I started a group for the North. I'm the northern end of howtobeadopted.com. And we have a little group that runs the third Wednesday of every month. And it's just an online, 7:30, I think we start. And we go for about an hour or so until we've said what we need to say. And it's just a very informal gathering. People share what's going on for them with their adoption. People who might be, looking to access records, to find birth families, sort of adoptee issues, how all that's panned out. And we'll have a topic of the month, actually. People can suggest the topic. So people have, put forward all manner of suggestions for the kind of niche little topics they want to discuss. And then we all have a think and we come and talk about that the following month. And that maybe takes not even half the meeting. And then we just have a kind of free for all and a share and what have you. And it's lovely. It's kind of, a find your tribe attempt. The idea was to meet, face to face in the north, because I'm based in Warrington, which for those of you that don't know, that's kind of right in between. Liverpool's there, Manchester's there, Warrington's right in the middle. And so we're not far from, a lot of the north, Lancashire, Yorkshire, Cheshire, Merseyside, Greater Manchester, blah, 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 we're accessible. So the idea was to host things at the Adoption Matters Centre in Warrington, but then of course COVID happened. So we've been Zooming, but there are plans to, every now and then have a little kind of gathering and really see each other in person. So hopefully that'll happen maybe this year, later on. And that's kind of the plan for that. But largely, I think we'll to Zoom, because we've got people from all over, that are joining us. We've got a gentleman joins us from Scotland, a lady joins us from near the Midlands. So, it's not, I think we're hoping to get people from abroad as well. That would be great. So that's me and where I'm up to. And I'll share a little bit later on about some of the research I've been doing that I'm going to share in May with this community. So you have to shut us northerners up, So I'm gonna shut myself up for a bit, or I'll ramble on for ages. So I'll hand over back to Claire and see you all later.
Brilliant. Thanks, Julie. That was great. So before we begin, I'm just really enjoying looking at the chat. So if you haven't had a look, then please have a look. We've got some people from all over the UK, which is wonderful. And we even have someone from America, I think, there. Hello, Carol. Anna said she's lost the sound. Hopefully you're back. Your sound is back now, Anna. We do have, so we've got mostly adoptees, and I can see we've got maybe a couple of adoptive parents, a birth mother. So a warm welcome. I think we put in the description of the event that we will prioritise questions from adoptees in the Q&A, but hopefully we've got enough time. We've been quite generous with the time, so hopefully we'll get through everybody. So yeah, feel free, and you're all very welcome. So without further ado, I will spotlight our host, our speaker. Here we go, Lara. Welcome. So Lara is going to be sharing her screen and taking us through her presentation. Just need to make you host, honey.
Thank you. Okay.
Fab.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Julie. And just wanted to say thank you to you both and welcome to everybody. And it's actually quite emotional and overwhelming to have so many adoptees in the virtual room, as it were. I'm sure for many of you, this is such a rare thing. And so I think for that reason, it's such a wonderful thing. And I think that, certainly in my own journey, had such a community existed, things might have been quite different. So it's a wonderful thing. And so happy to be here. And as I say, in this space with you all. My name's Lara. I am a psychotherapist. I work in private practice. I'm living on the south coast of England, sunny Dorset. So we're kind of spread around, Claire in the middle, Gilly in the north, and I'm on the south coast. But I just joined this year How to Be Adopted. And I came across them for many of the same reasons as I'm sure we all have the same journey in a way. It's kind of trying to find other people that understand or have experienced similar things, and that's why the community is so important. Working as a therapist, we understand how community is such a vital part of our growth and journey. And I will use the word healing, but as Didi said, just feeling better, feeling validated, and feeling understood. And I think that as adoptees, that is something that is seriously lacking. It's something that is endured in silence many times. And so to have that sense of community is absolutely amazing. I was adopted by private adoption in 1970, and my parents had been trying for several years to conceive, didn't think they could conceive. And so my mother at the time was under the care of a private consultant gynecologist who was also treating at the time my biological mother. And my biological mother was very young. She was 15 when I was born. And so he sort of acted as mediator, if you like, between my adoptive family and my biological mother. And so shortly after that, at the tender age of 9 days, I was sort of handed over from my mum, who was a child herself, to my new family. And yeah, that was kind of how my story started. And actually I kind of had a very stable life, if you like. And I think that's something that comes through from many of our stories. It's got nothing to do with the love and the stability that we're receiving. And we're not all receiving that. I'm well aware of that. We all have our story and our challenges, but the point being is, as adoptees, we have struggles regardless, because those struggles are internal, and those struggles come about as a result of the act of separation from the mother and the act of adapting to a new environment and a new life. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I mean, Jilly's research has covered one aspect. My own research covers another aspect, which is that of well-being in adults who are adopted. And so that's a sort of a side issue. But what I'm talking about today in particular is how we as adoptees adapt. So without further ado, I'm going to go into the slideshow that I have prepared for you. And as I say, it's just one of the things that as adoptees we sort of have to contend with in a way, I think. So, adoptee or adaptee. I just thought it was super interesting as I was coming up with a title for this, that actually, we do have to adapt. It's absolutely huge. That's what we have to do. We have to adapt as adoptees, and we're doing it all our lives, from the moment of separation. All the way through our lives, we're having to adapt. Now, of course, that's something that humans do, and I am going to talk about that as a sort of an introduction to how it works for us as adoptees. I've done the intro already.
Lara, I think in your settings, because we can't see your screen, so you might need to come out of full screen, maybe.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
No.
Oh, that's interesting. Am I the host?
You are the host, yeah.
Oh. Let me just go back into this because I can't understand why you can't see my screen then. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Yeah.
That was a mistake on my part. I'm so sorry.
Do not worry at all.
Okay, so there we go. Adoptee or adaptee. So I'll skip to the next slide, which is kind of where I had got to. So just kind of rushing through that. Yes, private adoption. I was told I was adopted early. We hear lots of stories about, and I do believe that's the right way to go about these things, is to kind of integrate that into the story, the narrative of one's life. But, even trying to do the things that we suggest, there are still hurdles, there are still problems and issues that many of us have to overcome. For me in particular, these were issues of identity, anxiety, attachment issues, low mood, and all of the things that we hear many, many adoptees talking about. And we know that adoptees are overrepresented in therapy. They're not necessarily coming to therapy with that as the reason for their issues. And I think that's a sad state of affairs, actually, because the lack of acknowledgement, the lack of acceptance around the issues that this can and does create sort of adds to the issue. I know for myself, I kind of felt like there was something wrong with me, and had that been accepted and spoken about, the struggles and the issues that I might have had, then it would have sort of made the journey slightly easier, I believe. But yeah, so as adoptees, we're always amazing at adapting, and I myself, no exception to that, including I would sort of pick up the accents of the people that I was hanging around with. It was amazing, really. I would literally just sort of morph into the kind of the personality styles and the needs and the likes and the desires, even the language type of accent that people were talking. And I think we just become so adept at doing that kind of a thing, and it's a survival thing. My own struggles led me to kind of quite a dark place, actually, when I was a teenager. And at that point, it was about trying to figure out, I needed to try and figure out what was going on for myself, because, as I say, the narrative coming back at me from my family was that my struggles were they didn't understand them, let's put it that way, that because there was no understanding, because there was no education for them or anybody really in this whole kind of world, there was that my struggles and how those struggles manifested, you know, as a young kid, I was exceptionally well behaved, and when I was a teenager, it went the exact opposite way to that. And so I was really struggling, but nobody kind of understood it, and I felt like I was really badly flawed, and I didn't understand it. And that led me down the path of psychology and ultimately psychotherapy. That's what I do now, is sort of supporting people, not just I'm doing less of that because I'm really trying to focus on this kind of stuff now, and sort of helping with the education around adoption and what that does. But as part of my master's, my research topic was well-being in adults adopted as young children, infants, and happy to have joined How to Be Adopted earlier this year, and I'm delighted. So we're brilliant chameleons, and let's look at what that does for us, and when it serves us and when it doesn't. So the thing is about it is that it's a survival instinct. It's part of an unconscious process that we all have as adults, but as humans. But sometimes it can have its drawbacks, and that's not to say that because we do that that we can't change. It's about recognizing in what circumstances and environments that serves us, and in what circumstances it doesn't serve us. And I suppose really that's trying to figure out, getting clued in on ourselves, understanding ourselves, and working out when it's appropriate to do that, but when it's appropriate to sort of, as Nancy Verrier says, come home to ourselves, as it were. So because our struggles are so invisible to those around us, often who haven't had the benefit of the education or the understanding or the experience, it can be such a lonely thing to go through. And it's, you know, some of the more visible traumas that people go through, like loss, or, well, we have loss, but, you know, death or divorce, that kind of a thing. People can talk about it. I mean, they struggle often to talk about it, but they can talk about it because everyone knows about it. With adoption, there's this whole kind of, it's shrouded almost in this sort of veil of secrecy sometimes, or mystery, and because they don't understand what it's about necessarily. And so people are not talking about it. And actually that was the main finding of my research, is about open communication. But many of us would have had experiences where it's not openly discussed in the family or in our friendships. And so that leaves us battling with a lot of these things on our own. And that becomes very, very lonely. And we can feel very isolated. As a result of this sort of adaptation, we can become kind of a bit numb, a bit disconnected. I don't know. I suspect many of you might sort of resonate with that, but can be this sort of sense of just ticking the boxes as we go through life in a way, and not really kind of not being present all the time, feeling a bit off, certainly feeling invalidated because of the feelings that we have that others don't appear to be able to comprehend or understand. So let's move on. So as we know, evolutionary psychology, evolution tells us that we as humans are absolutely brilliant at surviving. That's, if you don't adapt, you don't survive, essentially. And some of the ways in which humans do this, a bit like in the animal kingdom, is we make ourselves smaller, larger, quieter, or louder. And when we do that, we are protecting ourselves. It may be that our enemy, let's say, doesn't spot us or maybe put off from attacking us. And these are all unconscious coping mechanisms. They're mechanisms that are in place to help us either, as I say, go unnoticed or to kind of scare the others off in a way. And that is what survival is all about. It's all about adaptation. In addition to that, the group psychology shows us that our identities are really key in terms of survival. So how we view ourselves, our narrative towards ourselves, what we tell ourselves about ourselves is really important in terms of feeling as though we are part of something. So, for example, in-group, out-group theory or social identity theory, these are just two. But it's now accepted that in order for humans to feel protected and to feel safe, and actually in reality, when you're part of a group, you're safer. That just is one of those things that is a given and is accepted. So these are the two main ways in which humans survive. And this is like really ancient, this is evolutionary stuff. So we've been doing this for the longest time. And this is all humans. All humans do this as a way of sort of, keeping the species going. And then certain situations heighten the need for that. So let's say, you're in school or, you're in a group situation. This is when we feel most challenged as humans, because if we're on our own, then we're on our own with our thoughts. We tend to be sort of a bit calmer. But if we're in a group scenario, this is where these sort of techniques come out. So if you're in school and your peers are there and, there are groups, this is where we see some of this stuff happening the most. So all humans have to cope with that. But what about us? Well, as we accept that we're excellent as humans, we're brilliant at adapting. Although I will just say, we probably all know somebody who, at least one person who doesn't like change and runs the risk of being left behind. But, by and large, if you don't change, you don't survive. It comes down to that. But here's the thing: adoptees, we don't only have to adapt to our environments outside our homes. We've had to adapt from the very beginning. So in terms of where most people would be able to rest and recuperate and sort of get their strength back, and this isn't by no means a reflection on the people around, by the way. This is all internal stuff. This is not the environment which we were naturally born into, and so therefore there's this sense of having to adapt to this environment that's happening all the time. Now, I would just like to make a disclaimer there. Of course, I do accept that not all biological children are safe in their own homes. Sadly, that's a given. I understand that, but we adoptees are right from the beginning thrown into an environment that's not our own, and so this whole survival process is happening right from the beginning. So if we start to think about what that does to us, how that impacts our brains, how that impacts our central nervous system, it's absolutely exhausting. So think about all of that from the survival aspect to begin with. Then add to that the issues that we bring in, such as an unconscious need for acceptance, the seeking the belonging that, all humans want to feel like they belong, but adoptees, we have a real need for belonging because suddenly we've been separated from our tribe. And not only that, we have a fear of further rejection. Now, can a child or a baby verbalize that? No, of course, pre-verbally, that wouldn't be possible. But these are all unconscious processes that are going on. From the moment of separation, So, and also there's this kind of thought process that happens later when we can rationalize and we can, understand, of course, I as an adult can look back and go, well, of course my mother couldn't look after me at the age of 15. That's a no-brainer. Of course she couldn't. But unconsciously, there's still a sense of loss there. There's still a trauma associated with that separation. Again, I can later go, well, I don't want to see her anyway. It didn't, I'm not interested. That's a separate issue. It's what is going on to the human child and the story that is starting to build up from the moment of that separation. And so we do understand that very often adoptees feel like, this is why adoptees are often very high achievers, actually, is this need to kind of justify their very existence almost. Work ethic's great, isn't it? But not if you're driving yourself into the ground and just not really looking after yourself. And then, of course, abandonment issues that are part of the whole package, right? So, and because we've already acknowledged that people are not talking about this around us, the journey, the isolation that comes with it is adding to the issues that we're talking about, if you know what I mean. So we're already dealing with all of that, but then there's nobody there going, hey, how are you getting on with this adaptation? How are you getting on with feeling different? How are you, and so this was the findings of my research, which I will be talking about later, hopefully not in today's session, later in the year. But open communication is so vital for helping the adoptee to feel validated with their feelings. And then there's this other thing that's added sort of into the mix, and certainly was the case in my family, is that my mum kind of just didn't know any of this stuff, and especially the blank slate, but the sort of near birth adoptees are just expected to just get on with life, like the other siblings or the biological children in the house. And it's simply just not that way. And it just can't be that way. And so that's why this sort of support and education is such a vital thing. So you're going through all of this. There's nobody around you sort of saying, how are you feeling today? And actually the opposite is happening. It's worse than that, because when your struggles are sort of manifesting themselves, certainly in my case, you're being told off. So it's the opposite of what really ought to be happening, which is coming at this from a position of understanding. So the secrecy, the ignorance, and everything else that has sort of pervaded this whole thing means that, well, we've gone through all this, but yes, amazing chameleons. So we end up being brilliant at adapting. But if you look at this from in the natural environment, animals have their means of protecting themselves, but they're not doing it 24/7. They're not doing it all the time. They'd be absolutely burnt out and exhausted. And yet we are doing that pretty much from the get-go, and probably carry on doing that for most of our lives until we figure out that's what we're doing, and until we are able to work through that and find different ways of being. So we end up being brilliant. We pivot, we swivel, we kind of match those around us. We take on the stories and the viewpoints of those around us. We agree with people around us. It's a brilliant survival technique, really good. And we know that socially, it can be very helpful. Professionally, it can be excellent, advancement at work and that kind of a thing. But what does that actually do to us? Where are we, the real us, in all of this? Because adaptation is often absolutely a need. We've recognized that it's a need, but it can't be something that's happening all of the time, because if you're never switching off, or you're never coming back to you and who you are, and if you don't even know who you truly are, because you spent all this time kind of just morphing into what everybody else wants you to be, then where are you, and who are you, and how does this affect you? Well, what we see is, as I've mentioned previously, and in my own case, anxiety, low mood. Many of us spend many years feeling detached or disconnected. We can feel angry, our identity is all messed up because we're so busy being a chameleon and morphing into everyone else that we don't actually know who the heck we are. Added to which, we've got the problems of mystery often, and not knowing our origins and that kind of a thing, of course. Then our attachment can be severely impacted, and this is also exacerbated by the separation. So not only this issue of sort of changing who you are in every different environment can create attachment issues. It's a double whammy, if you like. But the biggest problem of all is that we end up living inauthentically. And I think that is something that as a therapist, that is something that not just adoptees, it has to be said, people do this for other reasons as well. It's something that most of us do, in my experience, but other people for different reasons also do this. It's that thing of coming to see your counsellor or therapist and going, I don't know who I am. I'm really lost. And I can't tell you the amount of times I've heard that. And usually it's a result of this type of thing. It's a result of not being true to who we are. And as adoptees, this is particularly a particular risk of our set of circumstances. So we deny our true selves. And like I say, often we don't even know who our true selves are. It's all internal. People are not acknowledging it. They don't see it. They see the act, they sign the paper, and then it's often just left, not discussed. There's no therapy, there's no support, there's nobody to talk to, and it's all internalized, which adds to the problems, as I've said. So in terms of kind of understanding how to work through this kind of issue, it's like how we work with all sorts of issues where we're the source of the issue, if that makes sense. Now, of course, we weren't originally the source of the issue, our circumstances were, but we end up living in that way. We end up being. And so in order to change anything, the first step is always that of becoming aware. Now, that's kind of hard, actually, because you'd think, well, you think most of us would know ourselves better than other people know us, but it's just not the case. Most of us don't know ourselves at all. And we have this this expression that we're blind to ourselves is really, really true. And so the first step in this is to become really aware of whether this is something that you're doing regularly, whether you're experiencing any sort of side effects such as fatigue and exhaustion and kind of low mood. And if you can't necessarily sort of pinpoint what's going on, could it be that you're living in this kind of a way? Could it be that you're not being true to yourself? So starting to become aware, starting to notice, tuning into yourself, reflecting, almost becoming your own sort of observer to your own behavior. Note that there are always still going to be situations where it's appropriate to kind of fit in with everybody else that's around. There will always be situations where that's the case. It's just, if you're doing this in every situation, then it's kind of, that's where it needs to be worked on. So is it about checking in with, when do you feel yourself calming down? Is it when you're on your own? Is that when you feel the safest? Do you feel less exhausted? Do you feel less tired? Do you feel stressed at the thought of going out and meeting groups of people? And that kind of a thing is where you'll get clues as to whether that's you kind of preparing to sort of step into this role that you have discovered works. It works. It's kept you going. But being true to yourself is very different. So I always recommend journaling, and I'm always amazed by how many people kind of initially will go, oh, journaling, does that really work? There is a lot of evidence that supports how brilliant it is, but those people always come back to me and they always say later, that's the one thing that made so much difference. How that works, I think when we have a thought in our brain, we have the thought, and we know about anxiety, the thought process starts, we get to the end of it, we don't have any kind of closure on that thought process, and we go back to the beginning of it, and we keep spiraling round and round. and then we can't get away from that thought process, and in the end that creates anxiety. Journaling is brilliant because the process of having the thought, then writing it down, is using another part of your brain, which kind of draws a line under the thought for now, which is why journaling is excellent just before you go to sleep. If you've got kind of repetitive thoughts, it moves it to a different part of your brain and it helps to bring a little bit of relief. But journaling is important for all of these things. Getting to know yourself is vital. Journaling is vital for that process. So noticing where you're acting like this, noticing how that feels. Are there any commonalities around the types of people that you do this the most? Do they remind you of anyone or any particular thing? It's just really getting to know where you're most susceptible to doing this and who with. So when you can start to become aware of it, then that's not to say you can change it immediately, but you can't change it unless you become aware of it. So beginning to work on who you are and starting to form a narrative of who you truly are. We know that we adoptees can be kind of, certainly we're the chameleons, but we can be sort of people pleasers and all this idea of kind of fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, and all of that stuff that we know is in there. But in the end, we have to work through some of that stuff to come back to who we truly are, the essence of ourselves. And understanding how we operate is a vital part of it. So really simple things. It's amazing, people don't understand even the simplest of things. What do you enjoy doing? What do you like doing? What do you really not like doing? What gives you joy? What motivates you? Really simple questions like that to start with, and then just being able to hold that as your truth and being proud of that. Growing your self-awareness about who you are as a person. And then after that, it does take a little bit of courage. We do have to find the vulnerability to be who we are. I'm pretty sure that most people here, if not, go and Google Brené Brown, but I'm sure most people here will have listened to Brené Brown on doing her TED Talk on vulnerability. And she talks about how it's vital to be vulnerable in order to get the most out of our connection with others. But it's also vital to be vulnerable in order to get most out of our connection with ourselves. So vulnerability is just part of the package. But if we can't be vulnerable enough to say, or to risk somebody saying, okay, well, I don't think I have anything in common with you. Not that they're going to say that to your face, usually. It doesn't matter that somebody says that. Much better to live your truth, much better to live your authentic self than to try and fit into every box that presents itself. So there will be groups of people where you feel the most able to do this, or certain environments where it feels like that's not so much of a challenge. Usually family is the hardest, I will say that. They're usually the last ones where we feel we can bring our truth, in my experience professionally and personally. But for example, how to practically go around this. So certainly spend several weeks journaling. I always think it's a brilliant thing to do that last thing at night. Notice what you've done in that, during that day. What situations have made you act in a particular way? How do you reflect on that? How do you feel about how you were? Did that feel like that was genuinely you? Did that feel like it wasn't? And just building up a picture of who you are. Up to the point where you can sort of get the courage to then eventually say, and it can be just as simple as this, but how many of us, when somebody has gone, for example, I love red roses, how many of us have gone, oh, me too? Well, isn't that more about having the courage to say, oh, okay, well, that's nice, but I'm more of a yellow tulips kind of a person. It seems so simple, but it's so liberating to be true to who you are and to be able to speak your truth. And it starts with these little things. Now, many of you listening might say, well, that's not me at all. I'm definitely pretty proud of who I am. And that's great. And if that's the case, that's great. But for many, many people, it's not. But the problem with it is that it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to adapt to those around us all of the time. I mean, yes, of course, life has to be a bit of compromise with the people that we think deserve that. the people that we think are worthy of our compromise, but certainly being what everybody else wants all of the time. That's just no good. It feels terrible. The benefits, well, obviously living authentically, we feel more empowered when we can be who we are and have the courage to bring our true selves. Actually, it commands respect. People talk a lot about how they kind of like people who are easygoing or kind of doing everything they ask. Deep down, we all are drawn to that person who seems to have it sorted, that person who seems to know themselves. And I don't mean, arrogant or overconfident or cocky or any of those things. Of course, that's all a bit off-putting, but quietly confident, self-assured, knowing who they are, and not frightened to say so. And I think that's something to work towards. I think that's something to aspire to be. It's hugely liberating. It commands respect. It means we have a better self-concept. Our self-esteem is much higher as a result. And it's just the purest way of living. What happened? We had no control over it. None of us did. And this is obviously one of those sort of really contentious points, isn't it? That the course of our lives was decided by others at a given point. And yes, there's stuff that we have to contend with as a result of those decisions. But it's never game over. There is always more that we can do for ourselves as well to live better, to live more peace with inner peace, and to live more authentically and just feel better about ourselves. The benefits of this is that, you might go from having 10 people to 5 friends, but those 5 love you for who you truly are, not who you're trying to be. And I think that really makes a difference. Now, I'm talking about this all in a very short PowerPoint presentation. In my life, this whole process probably took about 7 to 8, 10 years, and it's an ongoing process, because discovering parts of who you are, that's something that's happening for me still, and I'm 52 years old nearly. So, I suppose it's a shame that it came very late, in a way that I feel as though there was a lot of my life where I wasn't really who I truly am. But to have a few years of being who you truly are with your friends, with yourself, with your family is still worth it, and is, absolutely 100% worth all the struggles and the realization and the education and the understanding of what all of this has done to our self-concept and our self-view, and then working out how we can move through that feeling. Well, all sorts of ideas for self-care. I mean, this is a journey, and it is definitely one that's lonely, although less lonely now. We're all here. It can be lonely. So we have got to look after ourselves, and self-reflection can be difficult. It can be painful, but it's vital as part of being able to face into that, to be able to move through it. Yoga is absolutely brilliant for that. Mindfulness, meditation, support groups, therapy, if you can find someone, which Jilly's on the case for that one. Walking in nature, there's something really powerful about being outside in terms of, the whole of EMDR is based on this kind of bilateral brain hemisphere stimulation. It's really brilliant for lowering anxiety and just having us be able to connect with our deeper selves as well. So all of these things, and of course, top of my list is always journaling, but poetry, any kind of narrative, writing, creative kind of endeavors to help us process out of ourselves some of these feelings and thoughts. And especially when we first start to discover them, actually, because that can be quite a realization, that can be quite a moment. And if you, like I say, if you don't know quite where to start, just start by noticing the really small things. What is it that makes you smile in a given day? Hopefully it's the small things, like the sun shining, or, seeing an act of kindness. All those little things, if we can't see joy in some of those things, then, really that's how to live well, is to be able to kind of appreciate those things. But it's hard to do if we're not living our true self, or our true selves. So yeah, it takes practice. It can be a process. Routines are a great one. Our brains respond really well to routines and schedules. And we know there's there are some statistics thrown around about how many times we have to do something before it becomes a habit. But that goes for everything. That's the same as our, it's not just doing, it's thinking, it's saying, it's all sorts of things. So new ways of thinking, if we can keep doing them, there comes a point whereby it just starts to happen naturally. And also, you know, the benefits of feeling better, feeling more confident, having better self-esteem. When your brain starts to kind of get that feedback, then you're more likely to keep doing it. Initially, there's kind of this sort of fear of, or I'm not going to say how I truly feel, for fear of rejection. That will soon be replaced with a sense of pride and with a sense of, yeah, that's who I want to be. And that just keeps you going forward, really. And living authentically is the goal. So I just want to say thank you all for listening to me rambling on for 30 odd minutes. I'm sorry about the lack of screen share at the beginning. Thank you ever so much for listening to me. I hope that you have found some benefit in some of that. And I am going to hand back to Claire to take over from this point. So I'm going to remove that.
Thank you so much, Lara. Wow, so many points there resonated. I think every slide I could have spent half an hour on just chatting it through with you. So thank you so much. We've got some great questions coming in. I was thinking we didn't actually check with everybody about recording. So I think it's great that we've recorded the presentation, but I'm going to stop recording now because I would like people to feel like it's a safe space for us to talk about the queries. Okay, so